In-kind consideration described in this subparagraph may include the construction, provision, improvement, alteration, protection, maintenance, repair, or restoration, including environmental restoration, or a combination thereof, of any facilities or infrastructure relating to the needs of the Missouri Air National Guard at Rosecrans Air National Guard Base that the Secretary considers appropriate. D. Payment of costs of conveyance. 1. Payment required. The Secretary of the Air Force may require the city to cover all costs to be incurred by the Secretary, or to reimburse the Secretary for costs incurred by the Secretary, to carry out the conveyance under subsection A, including survey costs, costs related to environmental documentation, and any other administrative costs related to the conveyance. If amounts paid by the city to the Secretary in advance exceed the costs actually incurred by the Secretary to carry out the conveyance, the Secretary shall refund the excess amount to the city. 2. Treatment of amounts received. Amounts received under paragraph 1 as reimbursement for costs incurred by the Secretary to carry out the conveyance under subsection A shall be credited to the fund or account that was used to cover the costs incurred by the Secretary in carrying out the conveyance, or to an appropriate fund or account currently available to the Secretary for the purposes for which the costs were paid. Amounts so credited shall be merged with amounts in such fund or account and shall be available for the same purposes, and subject to the same conditions and limitations, as amounts in such fund or account. E. Description of property. The exact acreage and legal description of the property to be conveyed under subsection A shall be determined by a survey satisfactory to the Secretary of the Air Force. F. Additional terms and conditions. The Secretary of the Air Force may require such additional terms and conditions in connection with the conveyance under subsection A as the Secretary considers appropriate to protect the interests of the United States. Sec. 2854. Land Conveyance, Department of Defense Excess Property, St. Louis, Missouri. A. Conveyance to Land Clearance for Redevelopment Authority of the City of St. Louis. 1. Conveyance authorized. The Secretary of the Air Force may convey to the Land Clearance for Redevelopment Authority of the City of St. Louis, in this section referred to as the authority, or right, title, and interest of the United States in and to a parcel of real property, including all improvements thereon, consisting of approximately 24 acres located at 3200 S. 2nd Street, St. Louis, Missouri, for purpose of permitting the authority to redevelop the property. 2. Limitation. The Secretary may convey to the authority only that portion of the parcel of real property described in paragraph 1 that is declared access to the needs of the Department of Defense. B. Consideration. 1. Consideration required. As consideration for the conveyance under subsection A, the authority shall pay to the Secretary of the Air Force an amount that is not less than the fair market value of the property conveyed, as determined by the Secretary, whether by cash payment, in-kind consideration as described under paragraph 2, or a combination thereof. 2. In-kind consideration. In-kind consideration provided by the authority under this subsection may include the acquisition, construction, provision, improvement, maintenance, repair, or restoration, including environmental restoration, or combination thereof, of any facilities or infrastructure, or delivery of services relating to the needs that the Secretary considers acceptable. C. Terms of conveyance. 1. Instrument of conveyance, acceptance. The conveyance under subsection A shall be subject to valid existing rights and shall be accomplished using a quitclaim deed or other legal instrument. 2. Conditions. A. In general, subject to paragraph 3, the authority shall accept the real property conveyed under subsection A, and any improvements thereon, in its condition at the time of the conveyance, commonly known as a conveyance as is. B. Environmental conditions. The conveyance under subsection A may include conditions, restrictions, or covenants related the environmental condition of the conveyed property, which shall not adversely interfere with the use of existing structures and the development of the property for commercial or industrial uses. C. Historical property conditions. The conveyance under subsection A may include conditions, restrictions, or covenants to ensure preservation of historic property, notwithstanding the effect such conditions, restrictions, or covenants may have on reuse of the property. 3. Conduct of remediation. A. In general, the Secretary of the Air Force shall conduct all remediation at the real property conveyed under subsection A, pursuant to approved activities under the Comprehensive Environmental Response, Compensation, and Liability Act of 1980, 42 U.S.C. 9601 et seq., and the Defense Environmental Restoration Program under Section 2701 of Title 10, United States Code. B. Completion of remediation. The Secretary shall complete all remediation at the parcel of land conveyed under subsection A, in accordance with the requirements selected in the Record of Decision, Scott Air Force Base Environmental Restoration Program Site SS-018, National Imagery and Mapping Agency, 2nd Street, dated August 2019. D. Payment of costs of conveyance. 1. Payment required. The Secretary of the Air Force shall require the authority to cover costs to be incurred by the Secretary, or to reimburse the Secretary for costs incurred by the Secretary, to carry out the conveyance under subsection A, including costs related to environmental and real estate due diligence, and any other administrative costs related to the conveyance. If amounts are collected in advance of the Secretary incurring the actual costs, and the amount collected exceeds the costs actually incurred by the Secretary to carry out the conveyance, the Secretary shall refund the excess amount to the authority. 2. Treatment of amounts received. Amounts received as reimbursement under paragraph 1 shall be credited to the fund or account that was used to cover those costs incurred by the Secretary in carrying out the conveyance, or, if the period of availability for obligations